right. And so as promised, if you are here from the other video, I was talking about how the police don't receive respect in our city and across the nation, and how many officers are leaving for suburban departments where they feel that they're more respected and they're less in the public eye. A lot of the consent decrees and a lot of the reforms are very demoralizing to a lot of the police. And then I also like to explore the other part of that, which is the media exacerbating some of the issues between, especially and specifically, the Black community and white officers. So there was some information that showed that white officers were more likely than Black officers to tussle with a suspect. Yeah. And so there was this article about, so I started thinking about that. I was like, what else other than the historical context? Because, I mean, let's be real here. A lot of the youth don't necessarily have the historical context. They're getting this stuff from somewhere else. So be it social media, family, friends, or the church, right? Griot culture is, spoken word is a very huge part of Black culture. It comes from, African traditions and storytelling and things like that. And so I feel like our people are very susceptible to passing along, some bad information. And I'm not a censor, and I don't want to curtail anyone's First Amendment right. So I'm always about having discussions and having an open dialogue about your thoughts and your opinions, and not feeling like you need to be judged or feel like you are just unintelligent because you didn't know a certain thing, or you don't hold this view that, seemingly is very popular or accepted, right? Because a lot of that empirical knowledge has gotten us into a lot of trouble, and times have changed and are changing as we've moved into this age of Aquarius, as you can see. And so in this article that I found in relation to the exodus of police officers to smaller forces, or feeling like they just don't want to be police at all. Chicago Sun-Times did a report, the Watchdogs, on the exodus of 1 in 6 cops from the Chicago police force since 2016, and how that undermines the safety of the city. And so you want to think about, if there is a lot of tension already between Blacks and cops, and then the tension seems to be getting worse since around 2016 and 2020. And then, these incidences kind of fuel this cycle of distrust where, every incident fuels outrage, fuels the media, fuels more outrage, fuels reforms, makes the police feel like they're not appreciated or respected, or being painted with a broad stroke of just being, violent thugs on the street, right? And then back to another incident or another encounter where you have a tense community meeting, an already tired, overworked, and unmotivated police force, right? And so I wanted to get into what could possibly be the connecting factor when, like I said, I don't think there's that much emphasis in schools now on history, let alone on the history of like the police with Blacks and, crime and criminal justice reform and things like that. But I could be wrong, right? But there's also the point that a lot of these teachers have become a lot less educated as well. And they're teaching from media, and they're teaching from MSNBC and NBC and CNN. And who's to say that pastors aren't doing the same thing? So these kids are getting propaganda from school, the media, social media, and church, and their family. That's something we might want to look into once we start realizing that a lot of these youth have this irrational fear or hatred towards the police. Okay, and so I am going to show you this last part of my slides here. I never finished my little presentation. I was just trying to take some notes because I wrote a paper. I'm just gonna read it to you. So this is my own summary of what I looked into. Right, so is the media making policing more unsafe for officers and communities? Whether the media is making policing more unsafe for officers and communities is a question we should ask due to the current crises in police department retention noted in the city of Chicago as of an investigation completed by the Chicago Sun-Times WatchDogs. Chicago Police Department exodus, new cops are leaving in droves, published October 25th, 2024. Police are feeling more and more pressure to leave the departments in search of other opportunities and less stress in ways many have not seen before. The policing environment has notably changed since 2016 based on this and other studies that will be reviewed. The media has been a key factor in disseminating information in regard to movements for calling for police reform and could be a source of propaganda in the eyes of some officers and some in the community that is making retaining officers or keeping officers efficient and safe, and thus keeping communities safe, a looming and increasingly strenuous burden. Behind the Badge, a survey conducted May 19 through August 14 of 2016 regarding the change in attitudes following fatal encounters with police and calls for reform showed that a sample of 8,000 policemen and women from departments with at least 100 officers. Of that sample, 93% of officers are more concerned about their safety, 76% have been reluctant to use force, 75% find interactions between police and blacks have become more tense, 72% have become less willing to stop and question people who seem suspicious, and 86% say police work is harder today as a result of high-profile incidents. Oh. Biases of police officers need to be considered in any study completed in this matter. As per reported in the Behind the Badge study, 67% of officers say the highly publicized fatal encounters between police and blacks are isolated incidents, but 31% say it is part of a broader social problem. The majority of black officers, 57%, say encounters are evidence of a broader problem between police and blacks, while contrastingly, only 27% of whites and 26% of Hispanic officers agree it is a signal of a broader problem. Notably, 64% of black female and 54% of black male officers believe it is a broader issue. This leads us to look into the reasoning for why black officers may have biases that look for deeper issues that play outside the historical context of the black community and police relations prior to this period in 2016. Churches preaching on 2020 election and surrounding issues after George Floyd protests were observed in a study. Pastors often discussed election, pandemic, and racism in the fall of 2020. Highlighted that black Protestant pastors disproportionately urged voter turnout and registration. During the fall of 2020, most congregations heard sermons mentioning the election and COVID-19 pandemic. Pastors often mentioned these topics multiple times in the same sermon. When discussing the election, evangelical pastors disproportionately mentioned hell and Satan, and pastors in historically black churches were more likely than others to urge voting. In regards to racism in the pulpit by congregation, the following was observed. 83% of congregations heard at least one sermon touching on the COVID-19 pandemic, while 44% heard at least one reference to racism in America. Catholic congregations were found to be the least likely to mention any of the topics analyzed during the study. When discussing racism in America, evangelical pastors disproportionately used phrases like racial tension. Mainline Protestant and historically black Protestant congregations tended to discuss this issue using more direct terms like anti-racism and white supremacists. Per a Chicago Sun-Times WatchDog investigation, new cops are leaving in droves. As of 2016, of the 5,750 officers on the payroll, 950 have left, only serving an average of 3 years. We talked about that in my other video, so please go check that out. And so given that, and then how on the Behind the Badge survey, officers said they feel like people don't respect them. They worry about the risks. People don't understand the risks that they take, that they find that they don't have enough officers on the payroll. They acknowledge larger departments are more likely to change their behavior in negative ways that make them or the community less safe, as well as in making reforms. However, the reforms by the data imply a neutral or negative effect from officers' perspective. This data would be collected if possible over time to mark the differences in attitudes. Officers also cite becoming more callous, feeling unseen and unheard, especially younger white officers. Officers who feel this way are more likely to use harsh tactics and endorse aggression. So this all is very much in the research. So we need to ask ourselves, are we turning up the temperature for our benefit or for our peril? Black women specifically. In order to test the theory of whether the media is influencing the community, my suggestion is that we could research further where pastors are getting their talking points, whether it be directly from politicians, the legacy media, their own moral values, their biblical interpretations or leanings, what they believe their congregations are interested in, etc. One could also look into the media and use the same methodology to survey congregations as that was used. And those terminology used in sermons could influence voters like racial tension, and apply that same logic in a similar questionnaire to those same church members, and as a control, a similar sample from another environment not influenced by the church, but who can attest to hearing those same terms in other media, be it social media, legacy media, entertainment, or otherwise, and then compare those leanings and interactions with police since 2016 or 2020 or whatever years the most relevant or dependable data could be gathered. And so that's just a little snippet of like my theory on coming up with a survey. I'm sure there's research out there that kind of maybe gets a little closer to my question. And I'll look into that and I'll keep you guys posted. But do you guys feel like the media is making people more radical just in general? But do you specifically feel like we are putting our cities in danger, and are we putting the police in danger by not having honest, full conversations about the nuance of policing in large cities? So thank you for your time. Thank you for tuning in. If you have anything you'd like me to talk about, also, as well as with your comments or questions in regard to this video or anything else you want to see me talk about on this channel, please leave your comments below. I always appreciate and love reading the things you guys have to say. And I thank you for following, liking, subscribing, and please hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on anything. Thank you again, and you guys have a great one. Be safe.